You can see
Not
my
really.
what?
Cat.
Cat, and I don't have a cat here.
I know. Just
Just kidding me, huh?
kidding. So you
Yeah.
are in Lake Tahoe?
Yeah, really in Lake Tahoe.
Oh, okay. So you are in Lake Tahoe?
Yeah. In Lake Tahoe.
Oh, okay. So you
But
are
somebody's,
in Lake Tahoe?
I'm getting that echo again, so I'm going to have to back out and try. Hang on, everybody. Don't leave just because I do that echo again. So I'm gonna have
Also have to meet some other people. Pull out another now.
No, no.
well, I see Alicia has joined us and the Capinos from Eastern Pennsylvania, Juan. Peter is here. Welcome, everybody. In case I haven't said your name, it's don't take it personally. I'm looking through my screen here.
Happy Thanksgiving, folks.
Oh, yeah. And Afia, do I pronounce that right? And how is it in Sweden these days? Do you have winter up there yet?
Well, we have gray November.
Okay.
We haven't, this is the grayest month of the year.
Sure.
It's absolutely a month you would like to skip. We haven't had frost or snow yet. It'll probably come next week. Not in the part where I live. I live not far from Stockholm. In the north,
Okay.
they have snow, but that's the north.
We
No,
Well,
talked
I
to
always
our,
thought, no, I thought
we
Stockholm
talked to our
was.
son in, and he lives about 600 kilometers north of where Yvonne is living, and they have some snow.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm happy we don't have any yet.
Yeah.
It makes my biking impossible, you see. So that's it. But it's gray, and the sun rises at 7 and sets at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So the evening is 6-7 hours long, and the night is 8-9 hours long, and that is the drawback of being here this time of the year. It's not sunny California, you know.
But to give it a couple of years, Yvonne, with the warming up of the earth, maybe Sweden will have the same temperature as California. before too
Well,
long.
I am not looking forward to that exactly. So.
Of course, the thing is, in California, it depends on where you are, how far inland. You could be, like in San Francisco, it can be cold in the summer, and you go 50 miles to the east and you're going to be about 90. So, and right where I'm at right now, it was like about 40 this morning.
Yeah, I'm not very good at Fahrenheit, so, but I understand that it's
Well,
cooler.
yeah,
Mm.
40 is about 2 or 3 degrees centigrade.
Yeah, that's what we have now. Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
Forrest, and what part of the lake are you, north or south?
I'm on the west side. The west side of the lake.
Or west side? Okay,
Yeah, right here by Tahoe City.
okay.
I came in there to darkness the other night, so I don't really know.
I know
Here we
only the
are.
northeast part of it because my daughter lives in Reno and it's about 40
Okay.
minutes from the lake. So it's
Right. That's
only
off
part
on
I
the
know.
80. On the 80,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we still seem to have lost David. I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
I see an Iris on with us this morning. I haven't recognized that name before. Welcome.
There's already enough time.
What are
Well,
we waiting?
should we try to call David?
Well, I can do that right now. I'm not getting an answer right now, so maybe they're having technical problems at the house.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, maybe Forrest, you can start us off and we'll begin.
Yeah, David just sent me a text and said, go ahead. So yeah, let's do that. So we want to welcome you to the Roy Branson Sabbath School class. We are here week by week with different topics. We've been with Reinder Bruinsma, been speaking on different topics, very exciting issues, and we've appreciated his ministry to us. And I'm going to have a word of prayer, and then I'm going to open it up. But before I do, I'd just like to ask that when you come online and you walk away from your computer, if you come early, please put it on mute and turn the video off, because sometimes we get noise through that would not be helpful to the overall process. So let's just bow our heads for prayer. Father in heaven, we want to thank you again for this opportunity to be with us, be with Dr. Bruinsma in a very special way, give him words to speak to us, and be with our class wherever they may be across the United States, across the world. We ask in your name, amen. Okay, Dr. Reinder, I think you're going to be speaking on, oh man, no, I can't think.
I'm going to be speaking on liberation theology.
Liberation theology, yes. I
and
drew
political theology, yes.
I drew a blank. I know that very well what the topic is, but just drew a blank. I guess that happens with age. Anyway, so I'm going to turn this over to you, and I think you'll be able to use your screen. Are you going to use the screen now?
Yes, I'm going to try to put it on.
Okay. Okay, why don't you try it, see what happens. There you go. Oh, you must have been practicing last week.
Come on, be
Okay.
nice now. Let me see.
Okay, so go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Forrest. It's good to be back with you, with the group. Last week, we talked about a specific kind of theology. We talked about feminist theology. And that, in a way, is also a kind of a liberation theology. But today, we'll pull it a bit wider: liberation theology and political theology. And of course, liberation theology is a kind of political theology. And I want to speak in particular about two persons: Leonardo Boff, who is one of the most prominent liberation theologians, and then Dorothee Solle, a German political theologian, a Lutheran lady who has specialized in political theology. Well, she is no longer with us. She died, if I'm not mistaken, in 2003. So liberation and political theology tonight. First, a caveat. You know, I know that talking about politics is tricky. Fact is that, as you know, I'm a European. Now, Afi and I, we have lived in the United States for a number of years. And earlier on, I studied there. And I have tried very hard to understand the American political scene. And I try to keep up to date. But I must admit, I continue to find it hard to understand some of the things in the American political scene. I do not quite understand the degree of political polarization that I see in the States and that I see even within our own church. I must also say that some terms have a different meaning for me than they have for Americans. Now, in the Netherlands, I would not hesitate to tell people that I tend to vote on the socialist side. And I know that I have to be extremely careful with that term in the United States, because there it has a different meaning for most people than it has for me. So this presentation tonight, this morning, will focus on how some theologians believe that social and political circumstances impact on theology, and the other way around, how theology impacts on the way we look at politics and social circumstances. But maybe talking about this, thinking about this together will stimulate us to let our faith also interact more strongly on how we deal with particular needs in society, far and near. So these are just a few remarks before we start off. What is liberation theology? Liberation theology was, to a large extent, something in the Catholic world. Still is, but there are also Protestant liberation theologians, mainly in Latin America, but certainly not only in Latin America. It focuses on liberation of those who are oppressed in different ways. And therefore it has many different forms: Black theology, feminist theology last week, Minjung in Korea, etc. Sometimes, in particular in South America, the church, and here the church is in the first place the Catholic Church, the hierarchy is seen as part of the oppressing class. So it's very much part of the problem. And that's why it's sometimes difficult to make it become part of the solution. Liberation theologians, and I have abbreviated it as LT, liberation theologians are often accused of Marxist or communist leanings. Now, whether that is correct, that is something that people think about that differently. Some of the principles of liberation theology. The liberation theologians say that what they want to do is, most of all, critically reflect on praxis. It has more to do with how we live than with how we think about all kinds of theological problems. The key concept is what is called the option for the poor. Having special consideration for the people who are poor, and who are not just poor, but who are extremely poor in the slums of South America, etc. And in order to get a right appreciation of this, I think we must keep in mind the extreme poverty that you find in certain countries, and certainly in the large cities in Latin America. Liberation theologians say God is particularly interested in the poor. He is the champion of the poor. And the Bible has a lot of interest in the poor. The Bible inspires us to resist injustice, which produces poverty. Liberation theology creates an awareness, at least it's trying to create that awareness of what is happening in institutions, institutional violence, and sinful structures that you find in society and even in the church. Forms of repression, whatever they are, must be laid bare and must be removed. That is one of the things that the liberation theologian wants to do. And they say, well, it's true. There is some kind of ideology behind that, a way of understanding the world, but we should not be too critical of that, because any kind of looking at any kind of doing theology moves from certain presuppositions and from a certain bias. So liberation theology is a kind of politicizing theology. But of course, that has been done long before, throughout the ages. It's just a shift, an important shift in this politicizing. When we speak about this, we must, and certainly us who live in Europe, must recognize that there is quite a difference between the context in Latin and South America as in the European context, and also in large parts of the American contexts. The closeness in the Latin American context between church and state that is something that we don't see in this part of the world, at least. And yes, there is a great difference between wealth and poverty in many countries, but there are few places in the world where that is so extreme. And that has been part of the genesis of liberation theology. One can also understand that when there is such widespread poverty, Marxism has a certain appeal. And then we must keep in mind when we think about these places in the world that there have been countries that have been governed by dictators, by military governments, and these were often supported by the church. There was often a very close relationship between the leadership of the church and those dictatorial governments. And that, of course, has inspired certain theologians in saying what they have said. The liberation theologians point to the fact that the Bible is very specific about caring for the poor. God did not want his people to remain in slavery. They wanted them to be free. He said, "Let my people go." In Proverbs we read, "Who is kind to the needy honors God." Just one of the many texts in the Bible where it is stated that God has a regard for those who take care of the poor. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but he, that is God, has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. You know, this text that is so well known, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Whatever you did, Jesus said, Matthew 25, whatever you did for one of the least of these brethren of mine, you did for me. And there are lots of texts that we could add to that indicate that God is interested in the poor and that he wants us to be interested in caring for the poor. One of the most important liberation theologians was Gustavo, and I should not say was because he is still alive, Gustavo Gutierrez. He was a pioneer of liberation theology, born in 1928, so he is way up in year. Comes from Peru, was somebody who was a Dominican or is a Dominican, an advisor to the bishop in Medellin. Medellin is in Colombia. And I should say, when I see the word Medellin, I must think of the first trip I ever made to a place that was really poor, was Colombia. I went there in the early, I think it was mid-70s. And I was there, the guest of our church, and remember being lodged in a very nice hotel with a restaurant on the top that went around every hour or so. And then when I left the hotel, immediately in the same neighborhood, there was a slum area as I had never seen before. And I remember that how shocked I was to see that kind of poverty. I had never seen that before. It's always stayed with me. This man who was advising the Bishop of Medellin, he introduced the term in 1971, liberation theology. And the word became more common when his book about this topic appeared in the English language in 1975, A Theology of Liberation. In the book, he pointed to 3 dimensions of liberation: the political and social liberation against the background of this poverty, but also the further emancipation of the poor, giving them the possibilities to develop, and then liberation at a very personal level. In this book, Urières points to the Marxist philosophy and uses it in a defense for the oppressed and the exploited classes. But he says, the key for me is not philosophy, not Marxist philosophy, but it's praxis. What happens and what can we do about it? And he says for theologians, the main thing is not orthodoxy, that we have the right kind of teaching, but orthopraxis, that we have the right kind of praxis, that we do what Christ wants us to do. Faith, Gutierrez said, is not limited to affirming the existence of God. No, faith tells us that God loves us and demands a loving response. This response is given through love for human beings. And that is what we mean by a commitment to God and to our neighbor. So for him, it's not just having the right kind of teachings, but more having the kind of commitment to God and to our neighbor that is expected from us as Christians. A few important leaders of the liberation theology, and I think you have probably seen the names, certainly the first one and the third one. I'm just mentioning here 3 key people: Dom Helder Camara, Brazilian Catholic Archbishop, often nicknamed the Bishop of the Slums. An important statement from Dom Helder Camara: when we are dreaming alone, it is only a dream. When we are dreaming with others, it is the beginning of reality. Dom Helder Camara is long dead. He died in 1999. Another very important liberation theologian died recently, Ernesto Cardinal. He died in last year. Priest, poet, politician in Nicaragua. He was very much also a politician, tied in with the Sandinist movement that fought for liberation. And when finally freedom came, he became the first minister of culture of Nicaragua. Another name that I would like to mention here is Oscar Romero, and he was in San Salvador, Archbishop, and he was actually murdered by right-wing opposition leaders. These are just some important leaders of this liberation theology. Here a statement by Dom Helder Camara. I find this very interesting, this statement. When I give food to the poor, he says, they call me a saint. When I ask why the saints have no food, why the poor have no food, they call me a communist. But more specifically, something about Leonardo Boff. And I'm just looking at my watch and see how I am doing for time. Leonardo Boff, He was born in 1938 in Brazil, and he is still active as a professor emeritus of ethics, philosophy of religion, and ecology at the Rio de Janeiro State University.
Reinder, may I interrupt just for a second?
Yes.
Because it was my fault, although I don't understand why, that we got started late. So don't rush yourself, okay? Just take
Okay.
all the time you need. We're relaxed.
Okay. Yeah. So Leonardo Boff, he was a Franciscan monk, and Franciscus was, of course, known for his attitude towards modesty in life and poverty. He was ordained 64 as a Catholic priest. Studied also in Germany and received a doctorate at the University of Munich. And his work was on the relationship between the holy, the sacred, and the secular when it comes to the issues of poverty, liberation of the oppressed, etc. Boff became one of the best-known supporters in the early phase of liberation theology. But he did come in conflict with the Roman Catholic authorities. He was silenced, forbidden to speak for a year in 1985 after he had published a book, Church, Charism and Power. And then in 1992, he left the Franciscan order and also the priestly ministry. Boff's main emphasis, he emphasized that poverty is not born of spontaneous generation. It just does not happen. It does not fall from heaven, but it is generated by unjust relations among men. So it's something that we as people have created, and it's therefore something that we as people must deal with. Now, most of us would take issue with many of Boff's ideas about the Bible. He believes that the Bible is full of myth, but nonetheless, this myth is the best way of communicating religious truth. Now, that in itself would be something that maybe we could talk about for a whole week. The Bible is a human word in which the divine word is made concrete. And this is something that we also heard last week. In fact, in the words of the feminist theologian that we referred to last week. The Bible does not offer a fixed code, a fixed model for Christian conduct. There's all kinds of things that you could distill from that. So we must be careful there that we do not think that the Bible tells us exactly how we should behave. One of the main themes in the Bible is liberation, and that needs to be translated into our present political and social world. The Bible is a collection of religious thoughts and remembrances of events, and that serves as an inspiration for modern Christians who seek to relate their faith to issues of today. Apart from his view of the Bible, what is very essential when we look at Boff's teachings, he believes that the church needs to be reinvented at the grassroots. And he was one of the people who was very enthusiastic about the organization, the creation of so-called base communities. One of his main books was in 1988, when Theology Listens to the Poor. It was something that the awareness was created during and after, just after Vatican II, the Vatican Council. It was a period, of course, in the Roman Catholic Church that things were moving and people were talking about new things. The mission of the church in Latin America, Boff said, was, in one short sentence, to be the Good Samaritan. Theology had to be connected with human rights, and in particular, this was the option for the poor, the rights of the poor. And the political dimension of faith had to be emphasized, was very important. One of his statements was, we cannot celebrate the Eucharist in a world of injustice. The reign of God must become a historical reality. Today, social justice represents one of the most serious challenges to the conscience of the world. The abyss between those who are within the world order and those, let me see what happens, within the world order and those who are excluded, that abyss is widening day by day. The use of leading edge technologies has made it possible to accumulate wealth in a way that is fantastic, but perverse because it is unjustly distributed. 20% of humankind control 80% of all means of life. That fact creates a dangerous imbalance in the movement of history. Boff wrote that in 2001, and that imbalance has since become bigger rather than smaller. Another very important book written by Boff was Ecclesio Genesis. The word, in other words, the origin, the genesis of the church. Boff said in the primitive church, there were no hierarchical distinctions between the ordained and the non-ordained. Ordination, as it came to be known, actually didn't exist in the beginning. There was just the people of God, the laos in Greek of God. And these were all individual members who took on different functions in keeping with their unique gifts. But every one of them was laos, was laity. No distinction between people high up in the hierarchy and the ordinary believers. Worshipping communities, he said, in the beginning were small, what we today would call rather house churches. But over the past 2 millennia, this household model of the church was de-emphasized, and top-down institutions replaced the bottom-up community. The ecclesial hierarchies of the church, the divisions between the ordained and the non-ordained, and excessive authoritarianism became the order of the day. The church frequently allied itself with political and economic powers, often at the expense of the marginalized folks that Christ favored. The base Christian communities of Latin America and Asia were started to re-empower the laity, to avoid the burden of institutionalization, and to recapture the spirit of Christ's teaching and apostolic Christianity. Then he goes on to say that their example of these Christian-based communities can serve as the catalyst for a worldwide awakening on the part of the church as to his genuine calling. The book by Boff explores the parameters of this reinvention. And then he reminds us of something that I think we all know, and that is in the original Greek, the word ecclesia, that we have frequently translated as church, never meant a building in which people worshipped. Instead, ecclesia always meant a group of people, an assembly of people, the event of the people of God working together in full and non-hierarchical cooperation, to cooperate, collaborate with God in the building of the kingdom. That is, he says, what the word church means. And so this he emphasized very much in this book about the genesis of the church, that today it's not as it was in the past, and the church must really go back to its beginning, to these base communities, and to disappearance of this huge disparity between the hierarchy and the believer. Well, not everybody in the Catholic Church was happy about liberation theology. There was, and still is, a lot of debate, and very often very highly polarized. Catholic leaders were concerned about the use of Marxist theories. And they pointed to the danger that there was talk about class structure, and Christianity should be about the individual soul, the individual person who needs to be saved. Now, this was their argument very often. And they saw a danger that violent revolution might take precedence over evangelism. Yes, there is a lot of suffering, they said, in the world, but ultimately, God only can remove the suffering of human beings. Lately, it should be mentioned that Pope Francis has quite a bit of sympathy for liberation theology. And of course, we have seen him model concern for the poor and for the disenfranchised. In the evangelical world, the response has been in some ways somewhat similar to the Catholic response. The idea, liberation theology, is inspired by Marxist ideology. And they have said, many of the evangelical leaders, liberation theology studies history before consulting the Bible and makes a very selective use of the biblical material. Yes, they talk about poverty, but it's a particular kind of poverty, and poverty is much wider than just the material side. The horizontal is often emphasized at the expense of the vertical aspects. Too little emphasis on the cross and the resurrection. The evangelicals, who often did not become members of the World Council of Churches, they were very critical of the World Council because the World Council tended to support liberation theology, even to the extent that at times they felt that the use of violence would be allowed. Things have changed, and in recent decades, the evangelicals have become more open to the issues that the liberation theologians were pointing to, and were also more open to supporting development organizations, etc. Adventists, well, we have often had the same kind of arguments in our evaluation of liberation theology. And here we get maybe into a somewhat difficult area, but it seems that the Seventh-day Adventist hierarchy has actually too often been eager to have good relationship with authorities, even in countries where we could not speak of democracy or something like that. And you may have noticed that right now, the president of our church is in the Philippines, and he has visited 2 weeks ago, or is it a week ago, the president of the country, Duterte. Now, to many people, and certainly for many liberation theologians, that would be a step too far. You do not, as a spiritual leader, associate with somebody who has so much blood on his hands. But this is not new. It's often been the case that Adventist leaders have been eager to have good relationships with authorities, even in areas, in countries where there is no democracy whatsoever. Adventists are often also seen as a rich church, the Adventist church. And I know that when we were working in West Africa, the Adventist missionaries there were definitely seen as the rich missionaries. Now, I didn't think that we were so rich, but by comparison, we were doing quite well. And the way our mission service was structured was a lot better than for many other organizations. Adventists have mainly agreed with the objections that we have found in with evangelicals, and a good article to see the Adventist reaction was an article in 1991 in the Adventist Theological Journal of the Adventist Theological Society by Dorothee, Liberation Theology. Well, we take a step from Boff, Leonardo Boff, to Professor Dorothee Solle. He was very much connected with the emergence of political theology in Europe and also in the United States. After the Second World War, many were in shock about what had happened in the church in Germany. How was it possible that Auschwitz took place in Germany and that so many in the church did hardly protest? So there are some people who begin to write about that, who are very vocal about that, as for instance, Johann Baptist Metz and Jürgen Moltmann, but also very specifically Dorothee Solle, a Lutheran theologian. There was the fact of the moral failures and the lack of courage on the part of the church in Nazi Germany. How could that happen? The question that was asked, how could something like that happen with a people of educated Europeans who enjoyed Beethoven? And of course, there was some theories. Was it because religion had been seen too much as a private affair? Was it perhaps because of the Lutheran tradition in which you had the separation of the two kingdoms, where state and church remained separate? According to Metz, the main task for theology in Germany, post-war theology, was now to deal with the deep privatization of religion and theology. It's not something that is just something for the individual, that's private, but it has to do with how the society functions and with politics. It is connected also with human rights and with the promotion of peace. Dorothee Solle was born in 1929 in Cologne. Her maiden name was Dorothee Nipperdey, and she was born in a liberal Protestant family. Studied theology, philosophy, and literature at the University of Cologne, and got a doctorate in a topic, connection between theology and poetry. She married with Dietrich Solle, and she retained his name even after they separated, and she remarried a number of years later with Mr. Stevensky, a former Benedictine priest. Dorothee became a lecturer in Aachen and Cologne. Those are two cities that are not that far away from each other, and they are very close to the southern tip of the Netherlands. He became very active as a political speaker, in particular in the time of the Vietnam War and the time of the arms race during the Cold War, and was very outspoken about the injustices in the developing world. She moved to the United States and became a professor in systematic theology at Union Theological Seminary, where her husband, second husband, also became a university professor. Died in 2003 of a heart attack. And one of the things that was constantly being emphasized in the different eulogies was that Solle, Elizabeth Solle, was a prophetic woman. Some of the main things in her thinking: God must be protected against simplifications. And she says it's unbearable to think that there is a God in heaven who sits there in all his glory while Auschwitz was organized. How could those two things come together? Human suffering is not for some greater purpose. God, she says, is not all-powerful, and he is suffering and is powerless alongside with us. And it's interesting, some of the things that she says about human suffering when you look at the book that Rick Rice wrote a number of years ago about human suffering. Solle says, humans must struggle together against oppression, sexism, anti-Semitism, and all forms of authoritarianism. And one of the things that she emphasizes constantly is that Christians must work for peace, because Christ is the great teacher of peace. Professor Solle wrote about 40 books. Her foundational theological work in German was Der Stellvertreter, which was translated in 1971 as Christ the Representative, an essay in theology after the death of God. And yes, it was around that time that the God is death theology was being promoted. And she speaks about the helplessness of God in the world. And there is a book that is called Political Theology, very clear what she wants to do. In a year later, a book about suffering. And she emphasizes that we should not deny that suffering is real, and we should not try to find a justification or an explanation for suffering, because we will not be able to do so. It remains a mystery. 1990, a book, Thinking About God, an introduction to theology. And then The Silent Cry, Mysticism and Resistance. And as she became older, she became more of a mystic herself in her way of dealing with her faith and with theology. Dorothee Solle believed that at least that was something that she felt very close to, a politically engaged theology, but at the same time, a mystical experience, knowing God from experience, not primarily from books and sermons. She started in 1968 with the famous political night prayers in an evangelical Unedited church in Cologne. And these were many, many years, an important place weekly where people came together to talk and pray about praise. Dorothee Solle had a very important role in the peace protests in Western Europe when the United States the NATO wanted to place cruise missiles in a number of countries. There were enormous protests. And one of the largest demonstrations ever held in the Netherlands was in that period, where almost 1 million people came together. And that had never been seen before. And she was a very important person in that particular movement. Some of her statements for which she became known: Vietnam is Golgotha. The third world is a permanent Auschwitz. And she says every theological statement must be a political statement as well. So it must say something about what it means for the world. And I like this last statement in particular. We should eat more at the Eucharist. And we should eat more at the Eucharist, and we should pray more when we are eating. I want to read a couple of statements. If the most essential element of Christian faith is sin, and not our capacity for love, if the first thing that should come to our minds in church and in our religious life is our impotence, our weakness, our guilt, our repeated failures, then the die is already cast. Then we cultivate our own fears and coddle our own need for security. We deny that human beings are capable of making peace. We abandon the unarmed Christ and run away just as the disciples did when Jesus was taken captive and when it became clear that protection and weapons were useless now. We are tempted to look for other masters who offer more protection and security. The old vicious circle takes form. We are weak and we feel weak. We are afraid and we teach others to be afraid. We seek safety. That is, we wall ourselves in and hide behind the armor plate of power. Hide in the control towers of devastation, feel weak again, and therefore feel compelled to press the button. Christ broke out of this vicious circle in which we still live. The vicious circle of weakness, fear, need for protection, need for security, need for violence. It is not true, he told us. You are weak. You can do whatever you want if you have faith. You're strong. You're beautiful. You do not need to build any walls to hide behind. You can live without armaments. Because you're strong, you can put the neurotic need for security behind you. You do not need to defend your life like a lunatic. For the love of the poor, Jesus says, you can give your life away and spread it around. The mechanisms that runs its course from weakness to a need for security to violence is unsound. God is in you. You do not need to protect yourself. It is possible to live without violence and without weapons. That was Solle as an advocate for peace. Well, come to the end. I have a couple of questions that maybe can help our discussion underway. First question, should church and state, I should have added that, and state always be separate? Here is somebody, a political theologian, liberation theologians. They connect theology, religion, faith with the life of the state, this politics. Is that sound? Is that good? Should work for the poor or work for peace have more priority for Adventists? And if so, what form can it take? Should my Christian, my Adventist worldview stimulate me to be politically active? Or should I stay away from politics and focus on witness? Should the church, if necessary, from time to time make political statements? And then coming back to Boff, who talked about the base communities, do you see a future for house churches, for these small base communities in Adventism? So here are a few questions. Maybe there are more. And I hope it has been reasonably clear to give you a picture of liberation theology and political theology. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Reinder. It's very, very helpful. Let's take a break now. A couple of things. Forrest and I, or I should say maybe me more than Forrest, were concerned last week that some of our comments were very long and that the women in our community did not have a chance to speak till the very last moment. Forrest has done some study on this matter and found out that in some cases there's a 2-minute limit for a comment. And then there's an alternation between men and women. So a man speaks and then women are given an opportunity to speak, then men, then back to women. So we go back and forth so that there's a more even opportunity for people to participate. So I'm suggesting that we try that for a couple of weeks to see if it works. We want everybody to be heard. This is not an attempt to squelch anybody, but if some of us take too much time, then that means others can't be heard. So let's take 10 minutes now and be sure to let Forrest know if you'd like to be on the queue. And we'll ask Dr. Bruinsma to put that screen back up when we come back so that we can start with those questions and then move on to other questions as well. I have real interest in the question of Marxism and Christianity. That's been a concern of mine over the years, and I'd like at some point to talk about that, but I'd like to come in last. Let's hear from other people first. So it's about 11:37 now. Let's say what? 11:47, why don't we say 11:50? California time, let's get started again. That's a little bit more than 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I will try to not to talk quite as much, David, as I have tended to do.
No, we're happy to hear from you, but the rest of us need to be a little more concise.
Well, I'll be more concise as well if I can. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, just raise your hand, electronically. I'll be looking for you. I know some feel awkward about raising their hand electronically. I will try to see you if you wave your hand, and sometimes I've overlooked you. So anyway,
Forrest, can I say something?
oh, George, yeah.
I have an echo here. Yeah,
I can,
I think that the 2 minutes should be enforced very nicely, a kind of maybe 15 seconds before the ending of the time. Just you could say 15 seconds to the person, and then at 2 minutes just turn off the mic, because many people will not be able to abide by this.
well, we're going to experiment with it and see how it does.
Yeah.
Just, we've had some issues that have dragged on, and we just feel that it could be more concise.
Yeah, except
Thank
the presenter, Dr. Bruinsma, he could talk for 10 minutes, is okay. But
Yeah,
we as
right.
participants, we should be subjected to this.
Well, that's, again, we're not trying to be ogres here. We just want to make sure the class functions well and for everybody's interest. So, but thank you for your points, and we'll see how it goes today and next week. All right. Thank you, George.
Yeah, thank you.
Or Sister Alexander has a hand showing.
Okay. Yes. Did you want to say something now, Mrs. Alexander?
Oh, yes, thank you. First of all, thank you so very, very much for the wonderful presentation from last time and this time. I was wondering if you have heard, and I know beyond Orthodox, maybe clergy or lay.
By the way, let me just say this. As soon as we come to back from our break, we'll take your
Oh, sure.
question.
No problem.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Terrence.
Hi, George. How are you?
Doing good.
That sounds much better.
I found this way. I'm on the phone for audio, and I'm still on the video on the Chromebook because I have a big screen on the side. So my sight is not that good anymore. So I'm working well with this, and you can hear me well this way, right?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, very good. I could get on my Mac there, but then I don't have everything I used during the session and all that. So. How have you been?
Oh, I've been fine. I just ran up to see what my bees were doing. And they're out flying today, even though it's just 46 degrees. It's
Oh, I see.
so, but the sun's shining, so they get out and fly some.
Yeah. Our sun just coming out here. We had a lot of fog. There is still, I can see through the window. There's a lot of fog there. Yeah. So I like it. I like the winter and fall and winter.
Oh, so George, are you on twice?
Yes.
Pardon?
Are you on twice?
Yes, I am twice from the same place, Forrest. I sent you a message on that, so we won't be confused, thinking that I have a twin brother.
Well, he's better looking than you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, you know.
Is this a good time to get started
Which one you're
again?
referring to, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, yes, David, now's the time to start. So when you ready for me to start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I do have a timer in front of me, and again, this is not going to be law of the Medes and Persians, but try to make your question as concise as possible. Now, the first one is Mrs. Alexander. Are you there? I've lost her.
I saw her just a second ago.
Yeah, where? I don't, there she is. All right, Mrs. Alexander, if you would start and ask your question, you got to unmute right now first.
I'm going to try to get my questions up again.
Okay, okay. You're still muted, Mrs. Alexander. I don't know. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go to Juan Sabate first. So Juan, could you come up?
Off, but it wouldn't
it's
come.
off
I
now.
think I'm unmuted now, but
Okay, Juan, let me go to Mrs. Alexander. Tell me your,
it's Anastasia. Anastasia.
Anastasia.
Anastasia or Anastasia.
Okay,
It
go
means
ahead.
resurrection in Greek, or from the resurrection. Yeah.
Okay, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Okay, thank you so very much. It has been wonderful getting all this information and being here. I have first a quick question and then a small statement. I don't know, of course, the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Orthodoxy is not that common. People don't know, most people. There is a Greek priest, a Greek Orthodox priest, and recently this book is in circulation and it's called The Mystical is the Political. I don't know if you know of it or not. And he deals with theosis, what is to be theosis. And so I don't know if you've read it or not, but he doesn't mention liberation theologies, but he does say that the mystical is the political. And again, about the Eucharist, that one cannot fully participate when does not love and accept the other. Then he talks about ways. That's the one. So I was wondering if that is one of the books maybe circulates in Europe. I don't know. The other one's a small statement. Dr. Branson loved the book by Nikos Kazantzakis, The Greek Passion, which in Greek, the Greek title was Christ being crucified. Mm-hmm. And it was a criticism of clergy. So I don't know that, you know, has been out for quite a few years. I don't know if it's in circulation. And my last question, my last statement, in 1821, the Greeks waited 400 years to be liberated. and finally they took action. Would that be accepted today as
All right.
thank you so much.
First of all, is my screen visible again? Okay,
Yes, it
because
is. Yes, it is.
I was struggling with it. You know, it
You're
went
up.
so well the first. It went so well the first time, and as I was struggling with my PowerPoint, I actually did not hear the first question all that well, but I can understand that anyone with a Greek background thinks about the relationship of church and state, because that certainly has been an issue in the Greek world. Well, that is in the modern Greek world. And I'm not very knowledgeable about the Orthodox Church, but of course it is known to most of us that the hierarchy has a very important place, and that has given rise to many different to problems and issues. The book by Kazantzakis, I think I have it somewhere. I'm not sure, but I have read it, and I think it's available in libraries, and it may well be that there is also a Dutch translation still available in the bookshops.
Thank you. My first question was if you know of the book "The Mystical is the Political," written by a Greek Orthodox priest, Zouliotis.
No, I have not heard of that book, and there are very many books of which I have not heard.
Of course.
You know, but it sounds interesting. In particular, also the connection of the mystical and the theological.
Yes, that's what my memory when you said
as was with Dorothee Solle.
Thank
you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. This time I'll go to Juan Sabate. Juan.
Okay, this time it's my wife, Carmen, so she has the question.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to say, I usually don't say anything, but since it's encouraged, I have to say, it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy this Sabbath school. It is amazing. So I want to say thank you, Dave, for organizing, making such an amazing job here. And I have enjoyed, especially the last week and this week, subjects. It's good to look through different lenses sometimes and broaden our views. And even though sometimes may be uncomfortable, I really appreciate that. My comment about this week subject, thinking about Jesus Christ's ministry in this earth when he was here, it seems to me that he was pretty much a liberation theologist in practice. How do you see that? Do you see connections there? That's my question.
Well, I would have to think about that a little bit before giving a very a good and profound answer. But on the one hand, yes, Christ, of course, spoke about liberation. He came to announce liberation, he said. On the other hand, when the people around him expected him to do something about the political situation with the Romans, he said that was not the thing that he had come for. So, and that, of course, is then used by many to say, you see, Christ was not interested in freeing the people from the political yoke that they were under. So maybe that should not be the first priority for people, Christians, followers of him today. At the same time, I I would think that if we take the Bible as a whole, and if we look at the concerns of Jesus Christ, and we look at Matthew 5-7, you know, the Sermon on the Mount, and if we look also to the Old Testament and the prophets, then I think we would have a very good reason to say, well, yes, our faith has to do with the future and with eternity, but our faith also has very much to do with how we live in this world. And so I must say I'm inspired by people like we discussed last week, and by people that we discussed today, even though there are theological issues that where I don't agree. The fact that it is translated, that faith is translated in praxis, and orthopraxis, yes, I feel is just as important as orthodoxy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now go to Simona. Simona, over to you.
Sorry, until I unmuted myself. So it's really interesting sometimes, you know, how we look at things. I make a distinction between individuals and church as an organization. So an individual Christian should be involved in politics, as every other member of the society, because every aspect of our life is decided by politics. But the church as an organization should not be in power, because that historical has been shown to be a very bad thing. So I think it would be important to make that distinction. Just want to make one other comment. When people talk about Marxism, there has been lots of discussion about and calling people Marxists, and you know, when they engage in liberation theology, I think there is a big misunderstanding of what Marx actually stood for. And there is a statement that I often think about that said that Marxism is an attempt to create heaven without God. And actually his inspiration for the type of society where people, you know, everybody contributes what they have and everybody takes what they need, comes directly from the first Christian church. So talking about that and then saying that liberation theology is Marxist is actually a misnomer, because it is actually Christian. It comes from the first Christian church. And the last thing I want to say,
15 seconds.
The last thing I want to say, that it's a little bit hypocritical from rich church hierarchy to say that God will take care of the poor while they are taking money from the poor, while they're allegedly representing God.
Well, I think, Simona, the last one is the easiest to answer, because how could we disagree? And it is not without reason that many people have turned their backs to the church, because they have seen so many things that, as you just described. Your first question, individuals should be involved in politics. Churches should not be involved in politics. I agree that a church cannot be involved in politics, probably in the way of not probably, but in the way that that individuals are in party politics. But to the extent that there are major moral issues involved in what happens in society, there are moments when that is my view, that whereas the church should not tell people who to vote for and be there all the time to give them advice with regard to politics, there are moral issues where I think the church has not only a right, but has a duty to speak up. It's delicate. We have to be careful, but you cannot, in my view, totally separate morality and politics and faith.
If I can just, it's true, I
Yeah.
agree with that, but I said the church should not be in power.
Yeah.
That there is a difference, right? So,
Yeah.
so we can give advice, but we should not legislate our religion.
No, there I fully agree. And with Marxism, well, that is often a discussion that is not very fruitful, and Marxism can easily become a kind of a scheldwoord. What is that? What is the word that I'm looking for? You accuse somebody of something, it becomes well, the word will come back, will come to me. But certainly,
is it slander?
Yeah, almost that. Yeah. It's easy to accuse somebody of being a Marxist, but it is true that there is a major, let's say, tension between some of the views of Marx and some of the views of Christ. But the analysis of what is happening in society with regard to capital and labor and so on, that is not something that you can easily push aside.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to come to Johan Oster from Sweden. By the way, I just want to comment. I find that this is fascinating about our class. We have people from a lecturer from Europe. We have participants from Europe. We've had some Australia. Anyway, this is still exciting for me. Yvonne, go ahead.
Yes, I was thinking of the second question, work for the poor, work for peace. Do we have a real definition of our own attitude to poverty within the church? I'm not thinking of individually, but I'm thinking of the church as a whole, because we have prided ourselves so much with our great material achievements and successes, health and schools and so on, and institutional, prosperity. I'm thinking of, originally we called each other brothers and sisters. They still do in the Netherlands, and that is the very good thing. And to me, it seems for us who live in in the welfare, I live in a welfare society, I live in a rich society, it's a shame to be poor. And as long as we look at that, can't we really say we shouldn't work for the poor, but with the poor? How can we change our attitudes to poverty? Because we don't have a good attitude to poverty in our church. We have shifted it over to ADRA. It is not, which is absolutely good, but yeah, I'm wondering about this with our attitudes. And this prosperity gospel has its firm hold on us. So could you elaborate on this, Reinder? That's my question.
Yeah, well, to a large extent, what has been happening, the developments in the evangelical world are parallel to those in the Adventist world. We have ADRA now, and we have organizations now in the evangelical world that are similar to ADRA. But when you go back 50 years, we didn't have ADRA. We had, we had SOS for a while, and before that, there was no real organization of any. There was no organization of any size or yeah. So now I think it is more recognized by our church, by the evangelicals, that we do have a responsibility as Christians, not just to pour out the living water, you might say, but also to give the people real water and dig wells and so on. So that has been coming. And I hope that you who are listening now are not going to blame me for this, but I think our church, to a large extent, was an American church. And the attitude has in the United States, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, has been very much a church of success. And those who don't have success, well, what is wrong with them?
That's right.
And upward mobility, and with our emphasis on education and so on, that has been very much. And yes, of course, we have had Dorcas and we have had welfare, but there's also often the idea that these people, they're unfortunate, but it's often of their own doing and so on. But there has not been, I think, in our church, been the kind of sense that maybe we should fight for more equality in the world and maybe be willing to take a step back ourselves and yeah, try to do more for those who are unfortunate. So I talked with some people from ADRA some years ago, and they agreed that we actually should develop a theology for ADRA, a theology for how we deal with the issues in the world and how we can help and how we should help and how we are involved as Christians. So, yeah, what else is there to say?
Well, if my reply shortly, I believe that the hierarchical thinking that is so strong in our church, because we have such a hierarchy, and you know, also in the regards to women and so on. This is something that prevents us from seeing everybody as God's creation on an equal basis. And maybe can we work for the poor? We need to work for those who are poor in the eyes of the church. That is, as you say, those without education, unemployed, and so on in our midst. Not only the poor in some big city, but those in our midst. Because I believe there is a hierarchical thinking that is deep-seated within us, and I believe it's wrong. And I think that should be addressed too. Well, that was my idea about this.
Okay.
I might not express myself properly, but well.
No, and I'm a bit reluctant also to speak among these things because you know, we live in different parts of the world, and
that's right.
The situations are different, and the way we look at things are different. And at least this is a place where we are at peace with one another, and I would like to contribute to a continuing peace.
That is very wise. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you. I would now like to go to George Tichy. George?
Yes, I think I am unmuted now, right?
Now I can
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah. There was a comment before a few minutes ago about politics and participating in politics. My belief is that the church itself or groups should not be involved in politics, but voting, oh, absolutely. Everyone should be voting, in my opinion. because this is participating in the people's lives. It's making the country better and things like this. You mentioned Elder Câmara from Brazil. It's interesting because he was the priest or whatever was his title in a church there that I used to walk by sometimes, and I saw him several times. And in the 60s and 70s, he was very, very much criticized because his ideas were very extreme. That's the problem with people in liberation theology. Sometimes they go so extreme, and he was really connected to the communists, was a big deal at that time. And now a little question, do you think that the Adventist Church has the ability or the desire to actually be involved in something like liberation theology, being a liberation church? ADRA is a great thing. But do you think that the church itself could change the ideology?
Well, you're asking a lot of questions actually at the same time, and certainly people can be extreme and people can sometimes overemphasize a particular issue, but much has to do also with the size of an organization. In most places in the world, Adventists do not really have much influence, cannot have much influence because they are so small. However, the moment that you become bigger, it becomes much more difficult to not be involved in politics. We see that in some of the small nation island states in the Pacific. And we see that in some areas in the Caribbean. And we see that a little bit also in some African countries and in a country like Papua New Guinea, where we have a substantial percentage of the population is Seventh-day Adventist. Then not be involved in politics becomes political. And it's very difficult also when you have Adventists who become politicians to keep the lines clear, so to speak. Now, in Papua country, there, if I'm not mistaken, we have a minister of culture who is a Seventh-day Adventist. And lo and behold, 3ABN is now on national television. That type of thing can happen. In some countries in Africa, we are very much involved in the debate about the issues like, let me see now, what was I going to say?
Gender issues, you would say?
Gender issues, homosexuality, HIV, etc. So it becomes difficult to separate completely when you have a certain size as a group, and when you have some people, some individuals in your church who are very outspoken into politics. We need to be careful. We need to watch that. That is the one side. The other side is there are issues in society that are moral, where a Christian needs to speak up and where a church needs to speak up, even if the voice is only small. But we need to, for instance, speak up as a church, ideally, for equality for everybody in society. That is the Christian attitude. And I would hope that my church would also be able to say that is what we stand for, even though it's political.
Thank you, Dr. Bruinsma.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am now going to go to Monty. Monty, we're to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bruinsma, for your presentation. I want to come back to what you were talking about a little bit with social welfare in America. I'm a social worker, and that has been one of the areas of study and teaching for me. And so I would say that you were not mischaracterizing it. I'll use a phrase that I sometimes talk about for people who are experiencing poverty. Our policies have sometimes had an approach that I would call, and others have called, the nudge of suffering. And that is this idea that if people who are poor don't suffer as a result of their poverty, they won't be motivated to then do something on their own to improve their situation. So there's this hesitancy or fear about helping. Now, I don't agree with that approach, but I was reflecting on this topic of liberation theology, and I wonder if some theologians who disagree with liberation theology are fearful that if people don't suffer enough in this world, that they won't be motivated toward seeking salvation for a better life in another world. I just wonder if there's a sense of a need for a nudge of suffering here, and if that is one of the factors. Now, I will say this, I don't believe that. That's not my approach, but I wonder if that's a dynamic that's going on.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that I know the answer to all these questions. In fact, I am sure that I don't know them. But I would like to say that circumstances, of course, differ from country to country, and the attitude towards poverty is different, and the amount of what people will do to alleviate poverty and to get more equality differs from country to country. But there is certainly, in the past, there has been often the idea that, well, it's not so bad if you suffer in this world, because after all, you know, these rich people, they'll go to hell, but then the others will make it to heaven. And that's more important than anything. But whatever there are different models of for society, more socialist, more liberal. There are different ways of looking at things, but I would hope that in a civil society, there is whatever your political attitude is, there is a sense that we all should have a decent life. And that it's also a Christian duty to help bring about that such a situation. So, and I think if you have a society where there is great disparity and where groups of people are simply not respected and almost forgotten, then it may be political, but there is a Christian duty to speak up on behalf of the people whose rights are totally denied and who do not get the chances that they ought to have. So that's how I look at it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I will now go to Dana. Dana, we're coming to you.
Oh, hi, thank you. I have so much to say. Regarding the communism and the Marxism, I can testify that every time, I'm a sociologist, I have a PhD in sociology. I'm also trained in social work and chaplaincy. So every time I talk about social justice, I'm called a communist or a socialist. Apparently in America, people don't understand that there are different concepts. When we talk about poverty, we forget to talk about poverty culture and about the learned helplessness that comes with being poor. Regarding Solle, I wanted to say that Bonhoeffer, who lived kind of in the same period, he also talked about the powerless God. And his question was regarding the Holocaust was not where is God, but where is the church? These are just ideas, because I want to go back to what you said just a minute ago about rich people going to hell. Do we really believe this in the Adventist church or in the evangelical community? Because I don't think so. Max Weber, who came here more than 100 years ago, wrote the book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, told us that this idea is coming from Abraham, who was rich and blessed by God. And that's why Americans and evangelicals are trying to become rich and successful, because this is how we prove that we have God's approval and God's blessing. So it's coming from choosing self-righteousness over grace, because if grace is true, if we are all saved by grace, then poor people are equally
15 seconds.
saved with the rich people. Okay. So the question in Jesus's time, the question was, who sinned for this person to be sick? And the question that we are asking right now is, who sinned for this person to be poor? Thank you so much.
Okay. Again, those are lots of issues that you mentioned, but I like in particular the question that you repeated of Bonhoeffer, not where is God, but where is the church? And of course, Bonhoeffer was one of the few who saw that Christians were not doing their duty.
Thank you.
And thank you for mentioning that.
Okay, thank you very much, Dana. I'd like to now go to Peter. Peter, we're coming to you.
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to mention that I don't agree with this rule that was made about alternating men and women in their comments and questions. If the women have more to say, God bless them and let them say it. But the rule should be that if somebody has something interesting to say that contributes really to our discussion, to clarifications, we should give that person, man or woman, the right to say. Now, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and I'd like to answer your 5 questions. Can you put them again on the screen?
Maybe I can, but I'm just, I'm looking here for my pen that I had here, and I wonder where it has gone. Well, okay, never mind. Put it on the screen again, huh? Well, let's see.
Yes, please.
Let's see.
And I will try to answer very shortly and as quickly as possible.
Let me see. Is it on the screen now?
No, it's not.
No, okay. Okay. What in the world?
You know, I can read them off, I think. I mean, let me try by reading it here.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Because
well, I believe I remember the first question, if
Okay,
the church should be separated from the society.
Yes, that's the first
And
question.
yes, my answer is absolutely not, because the church lives in a society and can be isolated from it. Of course, we don't want to have an involvement of the church as it was, let's say, during Constantine time, when Christian church was becoming official, or let's say during Franco in Spain, when the Catholic Church was totally attached to Franco and supporting his regime. And there are many others. Then my answer is no. The church and the society cannot be completely separated. Actually, Jesus praying for his disciples prayed to the Father that he is not praying to take his disciples out of this world, but to defend them from evil.
Yeah.
The second question, can you read it, Forrest?
Okay, it's should we work for the poor or work for peace? And 2 minutes are up now, Peter, but go ahead.
What did you say?
I said 2 minutes are up, but go
Okay,
ahead.
well, according to the rule that you made, I'm done then.
Well, no, you can answer this because we paused you for a little bit.
The rule doesn't work, Forrest.
All right.
If we have 5 questions on the screen to answer that questions, it will take more than 2 minutes.
Okay, I will have to take that under advisement with the powers that be on it. But okay, so I'm going to go on now to.
I would point out something. He can always come back again.
Okay, that's fair. If we,
I can come back for the next question, or I mean, whenever. The idea is that everybody gets a chance.
okay, all right. I'm trying now to see who I have. I have Rodney. Rodney?
Can you hear me? I think I've unmuted.
I can hear you, Rodney, yes.
Yeah. I'm going to take a different tack here, and that of a problem solver, a pragmatist here. These are old messages that we heard this morning, are beautifully phrased. But we have to admit they're old messages. They go back centuries. They're traceable back beyond Christianity into the time of the Hebrews. So if you're looking for a fix to the problem that was outlined this morning, and I noticed, that, as we all would notice, a concentration of time. I'm going to take 30 seconds to set this up and then 2 questions. It was focused on South America and predominantly priests or former priests. And there's a reason that Reinder would have used those. I don't believe the change that is necessary in South America is going to come from sociology, philosophy, or theology. They've been around a long time, and the nexus of the problem is still there. There is a practice in South American countries. It's dysfunctional. The key issues you've got there are an unholy, I use the word unholy, it's a word I prefer to use, a coalition between the Roman Catholic Church administration and the traditions of the very rich, the entitled, but the powerful. You've got 2 very powerful entities in play, have been in charge and dominating play in South America for a long time. And until that coalition, the power coalition is broken, we are just singing Dixie, I guess. We're just talking around the problem and not getting at the problem. I haven't heard anything this morning, frankly, as much as I love you all, that has anything to do with solving the problem in South America. You've got authoritarianism at the top and consolidated injustice at the bottom. And what will it take to break that? Well, I've noticed since 2000, the increase in Protestantism, I think that's a good thing. The infusion of capital from Western countries, I think that's also a very good thing. Although the capital markets are taking money from South America, it hasn't prospered and done well. And if you follow emerging markets, and particularly Brazil, we're not having a very good time. We've also got a history of violent coups and non-violent coups. And what really has changed in South America? I would say very little. So my question is going to get to, what is the Pope doing, who is a very powerful entity in the world, and certainly in the world of religion, and he seems to be more interested in justice in America than he is in justice in his own southern continent. And then second question is, where is the model for government in the context of the South America? Because the context given to us was South America and maybe also Asia. And for a while, it looked like Brazil was very hopeful. It was going to show itself to be a model, and it really hasn't done that. It's now going back into decline. And as you know, and the Brazilians will know that there is an uptick in conflict, political conflict in the country.
Okay.
So I think what we have to do, there has to be some change in the power structure, and Reinder, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has to do and follow the example of Jesus. Jesus could have chosen to be political aligned. In his time, there were 8 political parties that he could have joined, and he rebuffed them all. So I'm going to stop there and leave you with a question.
Thank you.
What is going to break this nexus, this unholy nexus, and where will change really come from? At the moment, China is the one that's moving in. That brand and form of totalitarianism might end well. Thank you, Forrest, for a little talk.
Okay. Well, making change is not easy, not in South America and not even in the way this class operates. But I agree that we have not seen the kind of change in South America and other parts of the world that people had hoped for. But when I look at it, and I'm not an expert in these matters, but when I look at it, that I see there was a situation that needed to change. And you're probably right, it has changed so far very little, not enough. But when you see the structures that are there, are there, then Christians, and yes, most of these Christians in South America, they are priests, leaders, they're priests, they're Roman Catholic believers, but then Christians need to protest and need to see, what does my faith tell me about this situation? And even though it may take a long time, and even though it may take, well, maybe almost impossible to change the structures, yet as a Christian, you cannot just keep quiet. And that is what the liberation theologians, with all their mistakes and with all the things that I wouldn't agree with, but that is what they have been trying to do. And where Adventists can have a bit of influence, and where Adventists see things that are totally unchristian, that are sinful structures, then when there are moral issues, they need to speak up, I believe.
Okay, thank you. And now we've got 6 minutes to go. I'm going to come back to Peter for your second answer to your question, or to the question you were going to answer. Do you want to do that, Peter? There you go.
Thank you, Forrest, but I had my 2 minutes, and I'll give my rest of the time to the other people.
Okay, thank you. David, I would like to ask a question, if I may. Reinder,
Sure. And Peter, if there's no one else in line, Peter should be free. We're going to run over a little bit because we got a late start, but let's go another 7 minutes. And if Peter wants to talk the second time, that'd be great.
Okay, Jesus said, "The poor you will always have with you." Reinder, how do you exegete that text? Many will say, "Well, don't even try to take care of the poor; they're always going to be with us." And so just would like to ask, and I'm not trying to trap you in anything here. I'm just curious on your exegesis of that.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was, of course, in the context when the woman came with the costly oil, and she was criticized. Was it by Jude that this should not be wasted, right? And then
Yes, that's
Jesus
correct.
said-
That's correct.
And
That's
then
correct.
Jesus said, "The poor you have always with you." I don't think that Jesus made a statement there about indicating that, okay, it's all right to waste stuff. It's all right to disregard the poor. But he was simply, I think, accepting the kind of honor and the kind of appreciation from this particular woman. And he in that context, when she was giving this homage to Jesus, he told his disciple, well, look, don't use this as an argument. The poor you have always with you. I'm not going to be for always with you. So it's in that direction that I would exegete that text, but not use it as an argument to say, well, Jesus is here indicating that helping people who are poor isn't really the concern of a Christian.
Okay, thank you. David, I'm going to turn this over to you. You want Peter to speak again?
Okay.
Like this?
I'm looking at the time, and I'm going to suggest we go 4 more minutes, and let's go to Peter if he has something more to say.
Okay, the second question was if the Seventh-day Adventists should participate in different movements like the peace movement. Well, in your presentation, you mentioned that there are large demonstrations in Europe against Americans installing short-range missiles in Europe. Well, we should be, the Bible also teaches us to be wise when we are involved in something. Of course, we want peace. War is a horrible thing. And nobody in his right mind wants that horrible thing to go to experience something like that. But we should be wise, and we should examine the situation when we get involved in something like that. At the time when these movements in Europe, large movements against installation of short-range missiles in Europe, the Russians have 55,000 tanks, and of course the Americans were not able to respond in kind with that and needed short-range missiles to be installed to counteract this situation that was developing at that time. The third question is?
The third question is, should Adventists, just a minute. Should my Adventist Christian world views stimulate me to be a political creature, to become politically active?
My answer is that in countries where there is freedom to express your opinion and to participate in the political process, I think we should, as individuals, do that. And we have an example in our country here in the United States. Our Dr. Ben Carson was part of Trump's cabinet. And he was in charge, I think, if I remember correctly, with housing. And that's a good thing. I mean, he was working for the poor. And I think we should be involved in situations like this. But there are situations in which there are totalitarian regimes where you cannot express freely. And of course, we should take in consideration that. Next, please.
Okay, should Adventism have house churches?
Okay, that will be the last, I think. Well, we should have an experience with the churches in the first century when Christianity began to spread. Paul just planted something like that, house churches. And of course, in a situation like it was in that time in the Roman Empire, it was not very easy to come up with a different philosophy and with different worship, which was centered on the worship of the emperor, to bring up a new king, which was Jesus Christ. And of course, these home churches, they have a positive role, but also there were negative things that developed during these 250 years of persecution of Christian church, when a lot of heresies developed and the role of bishops was increasing. Then it was necessary an authority, a theological authority, organizational authority to be in charge with that. Then I would say that I don't see a very important role for home churches in our time today.
Okay.
Thank you.
David, to you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. This has been a stimulating discussion. I would like to just make one comment at the end, and that is this. There's a book called The Politics of Jesus by John Howard Yoder that I think is worth reading on the question of Jesus and politics. The Politics of Jesus by John Howard Yoder. Now, after he died, it was...
He is a Mennonite, is he?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
He is a Mennonite, isn't he?
Yes, he's a Mennonite, or he was. He's deceased now. And after he died, it became apparent that he had not been responsible in some of his personal dealings with women in particular. So you have to keep that in mind. My own view is that the book stands on its own merits. Even if the devil had written it, I think the book is worth reading. So I recommend that. And we will continue experimenting with our format. I think it went well. Thank you, Forrest, for being able to lead this out like a conductor of an orchestra. And we'll keep moving. That's right. Okay, here's the benediction. I think. Well, I had it, but now I don't. Number 6, where is it? Okay. There we go. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
I'll leave it open for those who want to discuss further.
I would say if anybody would like to comment on what we did today, just send us an email to the Branson Legacy and we'll take it under advisement.
Dan wants to say something.
Oh yeah, I wanted to say that what Jesus says when he said you will always have the poor, Jesus says don't miss this opportunity. Don't miss the opportunity to do something that is needed right now. And in today's terms, we can say don't miss the opportunity to help the poor just because you think the higher purpose is the kingdom and preaching the gospel, and that the kingdom will come and everybody will be happy and well fed. So it doesn't really matter what happens in this life. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.